Okay, so we're speaking about a revolutionary concept, and that is that the big question of how to deal with the animal soul. In general, this is in the context of those 5 categories. We are focusing on chapter 11 about the lowest categories of human beings, and that's the Rasha, to whom is evil, and the Rasha, to whom is good. In other words, the incomplete Rasha or the complete Rasha, someone who's completely wicked, and someone who's almost completely wicked. And that is that he still has some inclinations towards good. Now, we said that the complete wicked also, even though he's completely wicked and there's no real pull towards good, there's still a soul in him. And therefore, we should never be giving up on a complete Rasha, because that soul is still there. It might be completely dormant, but if ignited, it can awaken the complete Rasha and almost transform his status. That was the big idea. Now, the question is, how do you deal with the animal soul, especially an animal soul like the animal soul in the complete Rasha that is so dominating and so overwhelming? And here we were speaking about, again, this revolutionary concept that there are 2 ways to deal with evil. This is a concept that repeats itself in the Tanya. One way is to push off evil, to just say, I can't deal with you. I don't even want to let you enter my thoughts. And maybe that's the right way when we are not equipped, emotionally equipped, perhaps, to deal with evil. If we're not equipped, then trying to deal with it will only get us more, like we said, when you're in mud, you'll only get dirtier. But then there's another way to deal with evil, and that is to channel its force, or to harness its energy into good, which is much harder. And yes, one needs to be equipped for that and mature for that. But that's the ideal way, and that's what we've been speaking about. But let's continue here, as you said, Margot, with the 3rd paragraph. Yeah, 279.
Yes.
Okay. Anyone want to read?
I'll read today, Rabbi.
Oh, thank you, Jordan. Go for it.
In a sense, the Rasha, to whom is evil, is a purely theoretical concept that cannot exist in actuality, because something that is completely of the other side cannot exist. One can create a small lie or a big lie, but not a complete lie. Every lie has some factual component and therefore is not a complete lie. A complete falsehood is something one can talk about theoretically, but in actuality, no such thing exists. It is nil. The same is true of evil. If a person could reach a state of a Rasha, to whom is evil, in the ultimate sense, a state in which he is wholly evil and possesses no good whatsoever, that would be the point of death. Reshaim are called dead even in their lifetime, says the Talmud, because every degree of evil is a degree of spiritual death. If a person were to reach absolute evil, he would be dead in every respect, as he would no longer have any hold on the essence of life, which is connection to God. The other side is something that is negative in essence. Were it to exist in an absolute form, it would be absolute negativity, nothing, and total negativity negates everything, including its very self. In actuality, the Rasha, to whom is evil, the complete Rasha, is not really completely evil, for he cannot drive out the last grain of good from himself. As long as he exists, some good is in him, but he has banished it from his internal self so that it encompasses him from above.
Right. So I think there's a very powerful point, and a point that actually sheds light, true light, on the Rasha. There is no such thing as complete evil. There's no such thing as a complete lie, right? If I say to you, just thinking out loud, if I say to you, there's no sky, there's no sky, there's no sky, it's a complete lie. I mean, all you need to do is go outside and see that there's a sky. But if I say to you that the sky is pink, it's a lie. But it's not completely a lie, because there are times during sunset, for example, where the sun appears, where the sky appears pink. So there's an iota of truth in that, and therefore that statement can stand. Every lie has to have a little bit of truth for it to stand. Otherwise, if it's a complete lie, it's extinguished before it even is stated. Same with negativity. Every negativity or every evil needs to have a little bit of good in it, a tiny bit of good in it. Because if not, it would extinguish itself before even lighting itself, before even taking any type of existence. And this is what he's explaining now, and this is particularly true in the human nature. A complete Rasha, we might call him a complete Rasha, but really we call him a complete Rasha because there's no real definition to give him but a complete Rasha. But that in and of itself is not an accurate definition, because a complete Rasha still has some good in him, tiny bit of good in him. Otherwise, if he was completely Rasha, he would be dead, physically dead. Quoting the Talmud again, that Roshaim Nikraim Metim, that the wicked are called dead. But they are called dead because spiritually they are dead. There's no life in them, no life that is emanating and is, spreading light from them. But still, there's a little bit of good. Now, why is the Tanya saying all of this? Because the Tanya is wanting us to open our eyes, so to speak, that if, God forbid, we see ourselves as complete Rishon, we should never give up on ourselves, because there's still a little bit of good. Or if we see others as complete Rishaim, we should also never give up on them, because there's still a little bit of good. How do I know that? Because if there wasn't a little bit of good, they would be dead. There would be no one in front of me, or I wouldn't see myself in the mirror, because I would be dead. There's still a little bit of good. And that little bit of good should give us the hope that it can be ignited, and that it can eventually also salvage the person from the state that he or she is in. And that's really the way the complete Rasha needs to deal with himself, to almost ignore the bad and say, okay, I must have a little bit of good, because the proof is that I'm breathing, I'm alive. So if I'm alive, let me find that piece of good, and let me try and cultivate it and develop it to the point that eventually it becomes the controlling force in me, and not the negative side or the evil side of me. I think, by the way, that this is true throughout the Torah, but it's interesting, because up until this week, we've had the founding families of the Jewish people deal with what they called evil. Just last week, we spoke about Yitzchak and loving Esav, right? And Esav is at least portrayed in the Torah as an evil person. But Yitzchak, a forefather, loved him. Why? Because he knew that good in him still existed. That good in him still had immense potential. And then again, last week, yesterday, we heard about Yaakov and Esav. Yaakov could have killed Esav. He had the power to kill Esav, especially during their meeting. But and by the way, I'm saying that because of the Midrash that says that when Esav came to meet Jacob, all of his army fled from him, seeing the holiness of Jacob. And Esav was forced to meet Jacob by himself, and Jacob could have easily killed him. But he did not. Why? So the Hasidic commentaries say because he still saw a little bit of good in Esav, and he wanted to cultivate that. Even though this was a man who, again, was portrayed as completely bad. And we see that across the Torah too, that the way our forefathers and the biblical figures and in general, Jewish history figures have dealt with evil human beings is that they never completely ignored them. They never really wanted to overcome them fully unless, again, it was needed. Because they always believed, as the Tanya says right here, that there's a little bit of good even in the greatest of evil. Because otherwise, again, evil would not exist. It's interesting because we've spoken about this Hebrew word, but the word for evil does not just mean evil, roa. It also means friend. Roa comes from the word rea, which means friend. Now, we spoke about this and how evil can, if harnessed in the right way, can become a friend. But it doesn't just relate to the harnessing of evil so that its forces can be channeled in the right direction. But it also relates to this idea. Why is the word evil friend? Because in many ways, there is a little bit of good in the evil that I can be friends with. Even though it's still completely evil, but there's still a little bit of good in Ra that is Rea, that I should be friends with. Now, if I could be friends with that, then I could spark a complete transformation. That's really the power. You know, we see that with Jacob, just because we're dealing with these portions now, but it's just fascinating to me. There's an exchange in which, when this is not yesterday, but the parsha before that, in which he goes to the well of the city center. The well was usually at the city center then, as he was escaping from Esau, and he goes to the well of Haran, and there he meets Rachel, right? But before he meets Rachel, he sees all these shepherds, and he says to these shepherds in the most chutzpahdik way, he says to them, why aren't you walking? Today it's the middle of the day. Aren't you supposed to be out there shepherding your sheep? Why are you here just being lazy and doing nothing? And they explain to him, well, we're here because it takes time to open the well, and they give him a whole explanation. Now, it's fascinating to me because Jacob is a complete stranger, and here he comes to these people who live in that city, and he starts rebuking them. Why are they even paying attention? They could have easily told Jacob, hey, you stranger, who are you to tell us what to do? Get out of here. So why did they give him an explanation? Why did they even converse with him? And the answer is because Jacob, before even rebuking them, what does he say? Achai, ma'ayin atem. My brothers, where are you from? He engages in a conversation, but he first says to them, my brothers. When you become connected to a person as a brother, you really see him or her as a brother, then you can easily rebuke the other because they listen to you, they feel the love. And I think that goes back again to that little bit of good in evil. We can say, well, that little bit of good, that evil person is not completely my enemy, because there's a little bit of good that I need to be friends with. Roa rea. Again, that same idea. And if I'm able to say to that little bit of, hey, you're my friend, then that in of itself can spark a revolution. And the evil person himself comes and says, oh yeah, I see where you are. I'm connected with you. And I'm even willing to change the evil side in me. But that's really the deep idea of Roa Rea, bad being a friend, because again, we believe that there's something to be friends with in every evil, a little bit of good. And it just needs to be sparked. But that's the big idea here. Again, I don't want to be monologuing, so please feel free to share your comments and disagreements, etc. Otherwise, we can continue. All right, let's continue.
Just one question, Rabbi. Good morning, everybody.
Yeah, good morning, Isa.
It's a little bit besides the point. So does Esau ever turn good, or he always were not good at the end?
It's a good question, because Rashi says that yesterday, that when they, you see, that's an excellent question, because it just shows you that even though Esau was completely dominated by evil, because of Yitzchak, who loved his good, because of Yaakov, as we mentioned, that when he met him, he still tried to cultivate that good. Eventually, Esau does teshuvah. How do we know that? Because both Esau and Jacob come together to bury their father Yitzchak. We read about this yesterday. And that coming together, according to Rashi, is interpreted as them reuniting as good forces. So it just shows you that you can never...
If I could make a comment.
Yes, please.
The grandson of Esau was Amalek.
Right. Yeah.
And that tells me a lot, because you're judged on how your grandchildren behave.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true. But sometimes it's also beyond our control. Beyond our control. You know, there's a midrash, just to go in that direction a little bit, but there's a midrash about Chizkiyahu, the king, who was really one of the greatest kings in Jewish history, who did not want to have children. And the prophet of his times, Ishayahu, came to Chizkiyahu and said, how dare you not have children and fulfill this mitzvah, being fruitful and multiplying? And he says, look, I have this prophecy that shows me that my grandson will be an evil man. So why should I give birth to children that will produce an evil man that will spread evil around the world? And Yeshayahu says, well, you have to do what you have to do. If you have a grandson like that, that's cheshbono shel olam, that's God's accounting. Chizkiyahu indeed had a grandson, Menashe. He was one of the most evil kings of Jewish history, who filled the Holy Land with idol worship. And he was a murderer. He killed his own grandfather. But so sometimes, you're right. We have influence on education and on our children and grandchildren. Sometimes it's beyond us. But still, it doesn't mean, again, we have to give up, because there's a little bit of good in every evil. Otherwise, again, as it says here, evil wouldn't exist. You know, it's really interesting, because we see that a lot in the Torah. But one way is, again, back to the portions of the week. We see that Esav, at the very beginning, when he had the power actually to kill Jacob, he sent his own son Eliphaz to go and murder Jacob. Jacob was running away as a lone man, was running away from his parents' house, and there he meets Eliphaz who came in the name of Esav to kill him, according to the Midrash. And but he doesn't kill him. What he does do is that he takes away all of his possessions, because Jacob was able to convince Eliphaz that ani chashuv kemet, as the Talmud says, that a poor person is considered like a dead person. And if you take away all my possessions, it will be as if you killed me, because then I'll be like that. That's how he convinced Eliphaz not to kill him. Now, what's interesting is this. Why was Eliphaz convinced? Did he care about that statement of the Talmud? Did he even care about, he had a mission to fulfill? But apparently Jacob executed the same type of approach with Eliphaz. He treated him, even in the most dangerous moment, as a re'ah, as a friend. And that may have, according to some commentaries at least, may have saved him. Because Eliphaz at some point was ignited with compassion. And that stopped him from. But anyway, we see that in many stories, in the Talmud, in the Midrash, and in the Torah itself too, that when we don't give up on that spark, good happens. Does that good last? Does it last beyond a specific time period? Does it last beyond a generation or grandchildren generation? Not always. But it can still do wonders. Yeah. Okay, let's continue. Bottom of 279. A person's soul. Unless, again, there's other comments, questions, disagreements, and so on, please. Okay, so let's go. 279. A person's soul.
A person's soul is not just at one level, but exists at various levels, one above the other. There are 5 levels to the soul: nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, and yechida. As a rule, only the lowest of them, the nefesh, operates in the realm of consciousness, whereas the others lie beyond the conscious reach of most people. A person's ascent to a higher level is his ability to consciously identify himself with a higher level or levels of his soul. The highest level a person can reach is an awareness of his yechida, the highest essence of his soul, which at its primary source is the part of the God above that is identified with God himself. No one can drive this out completely. Man cannot uproot his divine essence, because that would uproot his very existence. A person can, however, reach the stage where he is no longer aware of the existence of the godly soul, because it has ceased to operate within the realm of his consciousness. When in such a state, the godly soul encompasses him from above. It still exists, but the person has no conscious connection with it. He can then live an utterly animalistic life, completely disconnected from the higher levels of his soul. He does not encounter them and they do not interfere with his life.
Right. I think this is really one of the greatest Kabbalistic concepts that exist. So every soul, and we've spoken about this, but every soul has 5 levels. The highest of the levels is what's called Yechida Shebanefesh, that unique, it's literally translated as the unique side of the soul. What's unique about it? What's unique about it is that it's the part of God itself that is inside each and every one of us. Now, most people don't experience that Yechida Shebanefesh. We experience the lowest, which is the nefesh itself, right? As it says here, there is nefesh, ruach, neshama, chai, yechida. Nefesh is maybe the lower self. That's maybe the best way to translate it, which really relates to us living as human beings, sensing different senses as human beings, having different inclination as human beings. That's all part of the realm of the nefesh. But there is the highest realm, which is, again, the part of God itself that's inside every one of us. Most of us don't sense that. Maybe once in a lifetime, twice in a lifetime. But it's that realm that basically says to us that we are a part of God. And as being parts of God, we ought to act godly. And we can see things that maybe the nefesh cannot see. We can see that the impossible does become possible. We can see our highest potential, and we can see our highest successes, and we can see our highest calling. All that is part of the Yechida Shebanefesh. Now, if a person is too immersed in this world, in the nefesh realm, then he becomes almost limited by this world, and he starts thinking small and being small. But from time to time, if a person is lucky, again, it doesn't happen to everybody, then a person can be awakened by Yechida Shebanefesh. A Yechida Shebanefesh that comes and tells the person, hey, you're much more than you think you are. You're godly. And it's time to act godly and to live in that realm where you are exercising your full potential. You know, just to give it some practical examples, but some people have said that this has happened to them when they went to the Western Wall. Have touched the rock and they felt this tremendous awakening. For some people, it happens during challenges in life in which they are deeply awakened. I think, again, on a practical level, I think that this happened to many, many, many Jews now on October 7th, 2023. All of a sudden, we came to realize that we are much more than we thought we were. Before October 7th, we were a divided nation. All of a sudden, we see that, no, we're brothers and sisters, literally. And no, there is a Jewish soul that needs to be cultivated because that's what they're after. And there is so much more that we can achieve as that godly being than we can achieve as that nefesh being, as that human being. And that's the Yechida Shebanefesh. Now, that Yechida Shebanefesh, as it says here, is never, ever taken away from the person. Even in the greatest of Rashaim, it's there. And if it can be awakened again, it can transform the person completely, 180 degrees, because it's as powerful as it gets. It's godly. God has no limit. So it can really transform and uplift the person to areas that he or she could have never imagined. That's the Yechida Shebanefesh. I will tell you this, that on a very, very personal level, but my father speaks about the revelation of the Yechida Shebanefesh in my grandfather, the one I'm named after. My grandfather was a soldier in the French army, and he barely practiced Judaism. I mean, my father remembers doing Kiddush on a Friday night and Passover a little bit and Yom Kippur. But when it was time for my father to become bar mitzvah, my grandfather decided, I'm going to take you to a beautiful synagogue to be bar mitzvah, which was about 100 kilometers from where they lived. So he took him to the synagogue, but the rabbi at that synagogue said, hey, not everyone can be bar mitzvah here. You have to be able to answer some basic Jewish questions. And he asked my father some basic Jewish questions to which he did not know the answers. He wasn't educated. And at that point, the rabbi said to my grandfather, sorry, your son can't have his bar mitzvah here. And my grandfather all of a sudden bursted into tears, as if like, you're taking away my Jewishness. And my father, witnessing that at the tender age of 12, said that this was the pivotal moment of his life, seeing the Yechida Shebanefesh being revealed in my grandfather, transformed and changed his trajectory in life. And that's when he decided to become more engaged as a Jew and to eventually live a life as a proud Jew and as a committed Jew. But sometimes when that revelation happens, it really creates a complete transformation. Now, the big question is that when it does reveal itself, will we stick to the mode that we were given, that we were shown when the Yechida Shebanefesh was revealed? Or will we go back to our old ways? But it certainly exists in every one of us, and sometimes it's revealed. And therefore, again, to go back to the words of the Tanya here, we can never give up on anyone, because every single person has that Yechida Shebanefesh, and the Yechida Shebanefesh, if we can spark it, can change even the lowest of lows, and can create a transformation, as we've seen, especially in the past few weeks, among many, many, many Jews, transformation that is lasting and that is forever also impactful.